Consider the history of a dialectic. The dialectic goes like this. On the one side is power, and the other side is truth. Okay? So, let's suppose that it's 1950. Is that a good date? No. Let's do better than that. How's 1926? Frege's just died in what, 24? 1924. Did Frege die in 24? Heidegger published Being in Time in 1926? Pardon my mistakes, please. There's some relatedness to Freud there. 1920s zone. So Frege, Russell, Wittgenstein, maybe these are just starting to take hold, right? And you also have Heidegger. Nietzsche is before. Nietzsche is what, 40, 50 years before Heidegger? Less. Heidegger's coming up in 1910, 12, etc. Nietzsche's dead by 1900, I think. So, the dialectic is set up roughly phenomenology versus positivism, or phenomenology versus analytic philosophy, or phenomenology versus the Fregean tradition, Husserl versus Frege. Phenomenology versus Frege. Continental philosophy versus analytic philosophy, right? Frege is a dialectic of truth. I don't know how much of a dialectic it is. It's not framed that way. But Frege is definitely all about truth. And a very rigorous, technical, mathematical conception of truth. Rigorous, formal, mathematical truth. That takes its place within natural language. Since Frege, I don't know how many phenomenologists of arithmetic there are, or people that think that the surrounding language, the language with which we present mathematical concepts with would be just as much on the table as the concepts themselves. So traditionally, the 20th century dialectic, it shapes up, if you say it's an antinomy, it's the antinomy between phenomenology and analytic philosophy. The antinomy between intuition and formal truth, maybe. Now, the power discourse, what? Comes from Foucault and other people. Deleuze, Derrida. You can trace it to Heidegger and Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Germans stuff, power, German philosophy. So conditions, historical conditions, right, versus formal mathematical truth. Antinomy. But see, if we frame it in terms of left versus right, Frege is very, very hard right. Rumor has it he's fascist, Frege. There's no surprise there. I mean, we don't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, not every analytic thinker is a fascist. So, but on the other hand, the personal details about Frege, I think, are at least well known that they cannot be avoided. His early sympathies with Hitler. So the dialectic changes because now the mainstream political right appropriates all of both relativism about truth, so epistemic relativism combined with some vulgar version of some Nietzschean Wille zu Macht. Power. So instead of standing on the side of veritas and truth, the right now stands on the side of discursive malfunction and raw power. Not Iggy Pop. We don't know what raw power. We don't want to attribute to them, so we must inquire. What is your theory of power? Stephen Miller is on record saying things like, yeah, well, reality is driven by power. Okay, give me your analytic of power. Where do you go to school? Do you have you done research on this? Do you have degrees in the theory of power? Especially the metaphorical versions? Because certainly there are plenty of physicists that know everything about power. So the right side in these political spectral terms, the political right adopts epistemic relativism and brute force as the leading ideas. Now, coming from 1960s progressive left, and the theory that followed subsequent, the way of speaking, for example, let's follow Foucault. A Foucauldian, if that's the word, worldview looks at power cynically across the board. Wherever power concentrates, one must interrogate the concentrated power. So certainly Foucault has a theory of power. I don't know what it is, but he has the right to use the concept of power because somewhere in there he's got a theory of power. But now we have a concern now. Now, thinking again in these political spectral terms, if we're thinking about the so-called progressive left, now you're left holding a copy of of Nietzsche and Derrida and staring at this political reality, scratching our head, wondering what to do. And you can see it as almost like a delayed effect, you know. If the progressives did the cultural relativism thing and the fuck truth thing, and they made things cynically reducible to power, well, they ran with it for. I mean, the left broke the ground, and now the right organizes with it. And you know, you hear these stories. I mean, I have a good friend who never misses an opportunity to emphasize that copies of Saul Alinsky books were found on the persons of January 6 assailants, January 6 attackers. Saul Alinsky. You know, Hillary Rodham par excellence. She's a disciple of Saul Alinsky. Community organizing, cultural relativism, will to power. I mean, these all were traditionally, or they tend to have been associated with the political left. So what I represent and what I've been trying to drive at is whatever the counterbalance is. And certainly, or, you know, philosophy has gone in various ways in order to try to counter relativism, and it's snapped back in a noticeably right-leaning direction, and I think it's gone quite a bit incoherent. But hey, you know, I'll wait for the philosophers to raise problems with me, because that's, otherwise we're just talking about nothing. So, if on the right side it's relativism and will to power, then what is it on the left side? Well, it's morality and it's logic, right? And, you know, it's not as though we don't have the tradition for that. I mean, look at all the thinkers, after all, that came with all the cynical analyses of colonialist reductive truth and everything. I mean, these are moral thinkers. Derrida is a religious thinker. Derrida is a religious scholar. I mean, he's, I would probably, if I said anything stronger, I would be merely projecting. But, you know, for all of the atheism that hard science would seem to be associated with, and ironically, strangely, maybe it's not ironic, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is ironic. Strangely enough, you know, you find a lot of atheism, sure, toward the left. I think there's a certain kind of nihilist atheism that is, in fact, and if you follow the work of Simon Critchley, for example, the Faith of the Faithless, you will realize that even an atheist may very well be a profound religious thinker. And these are ideas that are only really starting to percolate now. That just because you hear a theorist say that they're a card-carrying atheist, but let's say they seem to know everything about world religions. Well, I mean, you you decide.